This is Evangelist George McTyre from the Word of God Ministry, and I would like to address a situation that cropped up last week in some coverage of the Republican race for the nomination for President of the United States as it pertains to one Herman Cain. And there was a statement that Herman Cain made during an interview with I don't know who it was, but he used the terminology that in addressing the condition of the black community and our voting, he made the statement that the black community was brainwashed, had been brainwashed as far as it comes down to voting. And naturally the response to that was swift from the leadership of the black community. They had some unkind things to say about Mr. Herman Cain. I guess if Herman Cain had been white, naturally they would have used the term that he was a racist. But since he is black and he made that statement, they had some other choice words for him. I guess Uncle Tom or Sambo or something along that line. And one of the more vocal opponents to Herman Cain was the Reverend Al Sharpton. And in listening to Reverend Sharpton's show, Keeping It Real, as he says, he was sitting up, and he made some comments. Being the way that he is, he always likes to crack jokes on people, when he disagrees with them, call them all sorts of this, that, and other. And he came up with this phrase that he said he heard somebody else had come up with it first or so, like that, something about the fact that seeing that Herman Cain, if he had not been one of the top, ranked in the top 2 or 3 challengers in the Republican Party, they probably wouldn't even paid him any attention. But see, Herman Cain has now reached, he's the front runner in the Republican Party, and naturally the other opponents of his in the Republican Party take shots at him as well. But I want to deal with the black community and Al Sharpton especially, and the condition of the black community and why we are in that condition. And for this particular message here, I'm not going to necessarily refer to Bible scripture. I want to address the problem that I have with the black community, the Democratic Party, and especially the black leadership of the Democratic Party, whom most of all happen to be preachers, and this opposition to the Republican Party. Now, Herman Cain said that the black community has been brainwashed, and like I say, all black folks, every time I heard some black folks calling in on Reverend Sharpton's show, they were calling Herman Cain a bunch of names and so forth. I'm not going to repeat them all because I don't remember them all, because name calling is not something that I really get into that much. But I will say this. The statement that Herman Cain made, does he have a legitimate excuse or reason for making that statement? And if we will go back in history and look at the history of the black community, our relationship with the Democratic Party, the fundamental foundations of the Democratic Party, I would say that Herman Cain is right on when he says the black community has been brainwashed. Now, to give you a clear picture of this, we all remember the late Malcolm X. Back in the 60s, Malcolm X made a speech in which he was addressing the black community, and he was essentially telling the black community that they have been had, they have been hoodwinked, they've been bamboozled, they've been snookered, they've been took. I mean, he ran the whole gamut of what he saw that was wrong with the black community. And why was he making this statement? He was making this statement based on the black community's so-called allegiance to a party which heretofore had been the chief protagonists against segregation. I mean, well, basically, if you look at the beginnings of the Democratic Party and all the way through up till now, their primary focus was keeping blacks and whites separate, and not only that, but keeping blacks in a condition or a position of being dependent on and servants of their party, talking about the Democratic Party. And Malcolm X had warned the people, and later on Louis Farrakhan has warned the black community, and a lot, and some other black leaders. I think Dr. Martin Luther King made some references to it as well, and it had to do with this idea that when you put all your eggs in one basket, you are essentially leaving yourself open to be taken advantage of. You are going to rise and fall with whatever happens, in this case, with a political party. Well, the Democrats, having some intelligence, more so than I can say for the black community, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. The Democrats began to see that their overt way of expressing their racist views and so forth, because the Democratic Party was founded on a racist agenda, a slave agenda, a pro-slavery agenda, a segregation agenda, realized that they could not continue to operate the way that they had been operating, because black folks were starting to get some education, and black folks were beginning to see that they weren't being treated fairly, and that they would, if the Democrats kept on with this overt way of doing things, would revert back to the Republican Party, which, if you go back and check your history, if it had not been for Republicans, we would probably still be in slavery. And I'm talking about going all the way back to the beginnings before the Civil War. The Civil War was fought to end slavery, and it was essentially Republican Party that basically started the campaign to end slavery. And many blacks back in those times joined up with the Republicans up in the north. When they got to the north, they joined up with Republicans with the Union to fight against their former masters and so forth. And this led to naturally a lot of black folks being lynched down south. If they even looked like they were going to turn on the slave masters, most of whom, not all, but the majority, some 90% of them, were staunch Democrats, staunch segregationists, staunch racists. Now, the funny thing is this: if the Republican Party had had a history half as bad as the Democratic Party has, then black folks wouldn't have nothing to do with the with the Republican Party. But because the Democratic Party changed its overt racism into a covert racist agenda and so forth, black folks cannot see what is actually happening and who is actually responsible for it, because we have been brainwashed. Just like Malcolm X was talking about back then, he was addressing our relationship with the same people who, when John F. Kennedy signed in the law the idea of desegregating the school systems in the South, who were the ones that blocked the doors of the schools to keep black children from coming in? Democrats, George Wallace being one. We have the late Robert Byrd, who kept on getting reelected and reelected and reelected up until even up to the time that he died and things. You know, he was still capable of being reelected in the South and from Virginia. We had Al Gore Sr., staunch segregationist. But who are black folks calling racist nowadays? Republicans. Who are the black folks blaming for loss of jobs? Republicans. Who are the ones that black folks are blaming or claiming that are standing in the way of jobs? The Republicans. Now see, it's nice to try to blame the Republicans for something, but what facts do you have? Well, you say, well, they're standing in the way of President Obama's bill to, to create jobs. How do you know his bill is going to create jobs? Have you seen the paperwork? Have you seen the legislation to see what's in it? Or are you just going by something Barack Obama says because Barack Obama just happens to be this nation's first black president, that everybody, all y'all, most of you, I wasn't one of them, but most of you ran out to support this man, didn't know a thing about him. All you know is he was standing up talking about change, and that George Bush had run the economy into the ground and so forth, all of that other stuff. And all black folks fell in behind him just like sheep being led to the slaughter, with him up front talking about follow me and we're going to reach the promised land, and everybody saying, oh yeah. And now that he's in office and things have gotten far worse, and for the first couple of years, see, the idea of him trying to blame George Bush for all of this stuff, and y'all are eating it up. The problem is you're being you're being hoodwinked, and you're being bamboozled by the overseer that the Democrats have allowed to get up in the position of president. and you taking every word that he says as the gospel. Now, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this very carefully. President Obama, all of the senators, Democratic senators in Washington, all of the Democrats in Congress, and even if you go down on the state level, look at every Democrat legislator that we have and tell me this: how many of these people have ever run a business? I'm not talking about worked in a business, but have actually run a business. None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Or if there may be some, I haven't heard of any, but if there have been some, how many of their businesses were successful? None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. So what you have is you got a bunch of people that don't know the first thing about running a successful business, and you, I'm talking to you, have put these people in the position of running the business of this country. And what's happening to this country? Going downhill. How in the world, how stupid can you be to be putting people in office that don't know how to, can't even run a business, and you gonna put them in charge of the business of the United States, and also you gonna put them in charge of making legislation telling other businesses how they need to run, and businesses are leaving this state, they're going bankrupt, and more people are you know, they're going out of business, and more people are being put out of jobs, all because of what? You got a bunch of idiots that don't know the first thing, and that includes Barack Obama, that are out here trying to run this country, and they don't know the first thing about what it does to what it means to have a successful business. I would like somebody to contact me and tell me one, if you know one Democrat. I'm saying all, but there might be one or two of them out there. But if they are, they stay in the background. But then you got on the Republican side, Herman Cain, a successful entrepreneur. He's been successful. Everybody that's successful in this country, everybody that's making money in this country because they are running successful businesses and so forth, what are the Democrats doing? Attacking them for being successful. And what you don't understand is when you are attacking the people who are responsible for creating the jobs that most of you work at, then I mean, you know, what you have here is absolute stupidity, because of the fact that, you know, there used to be an old saying, you know, like kid take his baseball out on the playground and things, you know, and the kids want to play baseball, but they don't want him to play. They just want to use his ball. But at some point in time, he's going to say, well, if I can't play, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. And therefore, the same thing goes with these businesses. You keep on warring against these businesses for being successful, and what's the end result? The business going to shut down or go to another country, so forth, because you keep on siding with the people that don't know what they're doing. I don't know how many, I don't know, here in Detroit, we have a talk show host, her name is Mildred Gaddis. And once a week or so, she has a friend of hers come on the show. He's a financial, he deals with financial issues and things. And, he's well known here in the city. His name is Ellis Liddell. And even Ellis Liddell has said that Barack Obama needs to get away from this idea of raising taxes on businesses and things, because the end result is it's going to lead to more people losing their jobs. But Barack Obama has his own agenda. He wants to continue to try to get people to support raising taxes on businesses. And mind you now, Barack Obama's never run a business. He don't know the first thing about running a business. Now you got his vice president, Al Gore. I mean, not Al Gore, forgive me. Joe Biden. Joe Biden was one of the senators back during the Carter era from 76 to 80 that implemented legislation that destroyed over 1 million jobs in 4 years, when the Democratic Party took sides with environmentalists and animal rights groups and passed legislation where we had to start, automakers had to start installing emissions control things on all of the cars. Plus they had to add emission control things in the factories, because they say everybody we were polluting the environment and so forth. And they, since in 76 to 80, they had a super majority where they could do whatever they wanted to do, and the Republicans couldn't stop them anyway. The Republicans couldn't filibuster, they couldn't do anything. So they got all of this stuff passed, and what happened? A couple of automobile companies, American Motors, and I think there was another one, Packard or something like that. All of them had to go out of business. You know why? Because they couldn't afford all of the necessary equipment to install. And since the technology was new, companies had to spend millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars, to come up with the technology to meet the standards that the Democrats put in play back then. And those standards are in play today. In other words, the automobile companies still have to meet the standards that were set back under Jimmy Carter. And in all of these instances, when all of that takes place, the prices of the automobiles and stuff go up. There's less demand for the product because the price is too high, and that results in job loss. Now everybody's talking about the fact, well, Barack Obama being our first black president and things, and the only reason why the Republicans are against him is because he's black. Well, let me ask you this. If Barack Obama had been a Republican, would you have voted for him? No, you wouldn't, because your mind don't even think like that. It's either Democrat or nothing. Black folks will sit at home on their rear ends and not vote at all, rather than go out and vote for a Republican. Any of the cities, like here, the city of Detroit and other states around the country, whenever a black person that's a Republican runs for any major office or something like that, and they have an agenda that will bear the evidence of the fact that it is an agenda that's going to improve things for blacks, because the person is a Republican, they won't vote for him. That's being brainwashed. That's being stupid. That's being hoodwinked, and bamboozled. And like I said, I was listening to Al Sharpton today, and the only thing he was doing, sitting up cracking jokes on Herman Cain, and then talking about the fact he's going to lead some march or some protest somewhere all over the country. We got Reverend Jesse Jackson, someplace he was here in Detroit, protesting the fact about people being kicked off of welfare and so forth, and blaming the Republicans for it, since we happen to have a Republican governor that said enough is enough. People can't be expecting to be taken care of the rest of their life at the expense of the taxpayer, especially here in Michigan, when people are leaving this state right and left. And this is only only a few states that have such a liberal welfare policy that people come from all over the country here to get on welfare because their states have kicked them off. So they gonna come here to Michigan, and then now when we say we can't afford it no more and we want to cut them off, then here they come protesting. Because why? Because it happens to be a Republican president, a Republican governor. So like I'm saying, the bottom line is the black community has been hoodwinked, bamboozled, and like Herman Cain said, brainwashed. And the problem is, see, you following leaders that themselves are either brainwashed or they are, in most instances, overseers. You know what an overseer is? Overseer is the slave or something that the master used to have on the plantation, that when things when the master wanted to know what the slaves were thinking, if they were thinking about running off or coming to attack the master's house or do harm to the master, the overseer was somebody that would go out there and point out the ones that were the troublemakers, and so that the master could take them out and beat them or lynch them or whatever the case may be to keep everybody else in line. Well, that's essentially what you got Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson doing. They are overseers. When President Obama wants to whip the black community in shape, he calls on Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and some other of these preachers. They go around and start telling the people, now, we got to get together. We got to get together and get behind President Obama, get behind the Democrat. I don't care if the person's black, white, red, yellow, or whatever. If they are bad news for the economy, then they are bad news for the economy. This is not the first time that Republicans have essentially gone against Democrats when it comes down to economy and jobs, raising taxes and all that other stuff. They've always been doing it. The problem is, see, Republicans are getting smart now. And by that, I've always said that even though I like the Republican Party, they are too weak-minded. They are too willing, they are willing in too many instances to compromise on issues just because of the fact they want to get reelected. But now you got a new group of people called the Tea Party that has elected candidates, and these candidates aren't going to compromise, because it doesn't do any good for a Republican to compromise with a Democrat anyway. Whenever Democrats talk about compromising, what they mean is they want the Republican Party to compromise with them. They stay where they are, and they want the Republicans to drop down from the position that they have taken. Good example is this. Let's say, for instance, the Democrats have a budget set up where they want to have maybe $150 billion increase in the budget. Republicans, they say, well, we want $150 billion, but what we'll do is we'll present the Republicans with a $175 billion package. And so they go in with the Republicans. They say, we got this $175 billion budget that we want to pass. Will you sign it with us? The Republicans say, no, you're going to have to we'll compromise with you a little bit, but you're going to have to drop that down to, they said, well, how about we drop it down to 150 billion? Now, mind you, the 150 billion is what the Democrats really want. But see, they throw in 175 billion or maybe even 200 billion. They get the Republicans to say, that's too much. If you drop it down to 150 billion, we'll go along with it. Well, see, the Democrats got what they wanted in the first place. That's what they wanted, the 150. They put it up to $200 billion, and then they give the Republicans the feeling of that they have compromised on something when they really haven't. They've tried to hoodwink and bamboozle the Republicans. So they get to build everything the way they wanted. The Republicans got egg on their face because they find out, you know, that they've been played by the Democrats. Well, now we got a bunch of Republicans that are saying, no, we aren't going that route anymore. You throwing these numbers up at us and carrying on. We aren't going to compromise on anything. We said no, we aren't going to stand for it. And see, I used to call the Republicans a bunch of panty wastes because they always compromising, trying to look good so that they can get reelected. And what usually ends up happening when it comes time for them to be running for election, the Democrats go out and call them a bunch of, tell them, you know, that they don't really have any, the Republicans don't have anything to stand on because they helped pass this bill that's causing all this misery and so forth. And you always hear President Obama talking about, well, you know, this is a bipartisan effort. Well, what does bipartisan mean? Well, see, bipartisan to me means that if you can get maybe half of the Republicans to agree with you, with the Democrats or something like that, that would be bipartisan. But what we have is a situation where you got maybe 2 Republicans out of 40 or 50 agreeing for something, or in the Congress, however the numbers are, you got 2 or 3 of them, and they compromise with the Democrats. Then the president can go out and say, we had a bipartisan solution to the problem, and then the Republicans turn their back on it. See all that type of foolishness. So it all boils down to the same thing. You keep on supporting the Democratic Party, and I'm going to keep on telling you that you've been had, you've been hoodwinked, you've been bamboozled, you've been snookered, you've been took, and like Herman Cain says, you have been brainwashed. And that means you too, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Jeremiah Wright. How in the world is Jeremiah Wright going to come talking about the fact that back after we got bombed by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor, that and this war was going on and so forth, and when we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war, he's going to blame the United States for defending itself and then doing what we could to end the war. See, that's how much brainwashing these black preachers that are leaders in the community standing up talking about this foolishness. Now, mind you, now I haven't even talked about the things as far as God is concerned. See, because a lot of y'all want to try to throw Bible stuff in there and stuff. I'm giving this straight to the point for those of you that you can't say that I'm some sort of religious nut or something. Because see, I'm talking to you flat out, straight to the point. Like I said from the beginning, I wasn't going to bring God or the Bible into this, but I'm telling you from a practical standpoint that as long as y'all keep on hooking up with the Democratic Party, they're going to tear you down and make you just what you are, slaves. That's all they want. They want you to remain slaves. They couldn't do it overtly with all of the affirmative action bills and this, that, and the other. So what they do is they use the public school systems, which they have control of, to run you through the school system. get you out of, graduate out of high school and you can't even fill out a job application. That's to help keep you ignorant. Y'all better wake up and realize what the Democrats are doing to you. This is Evangelist George McTyre saying good day.